Good evening and welcome to the Fredonia Central School Board of Education meeting for Tuesday, November 19th, 2019. We start each meeting with a pledge to the flag. If everyone will rise. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The board has reserved this time to hear comments from the audience. Those wishing to address the board are asked to stand, give their name and address, and limit their comments to 5 minutes or less per individual or group. Concerns and comments during this section should be directly related to items listed on the proposed agenda for this meeting. Audience members seeking a response should complete a board correspondence sheet and return that sheet to the district clerk, Christine Slagle. Is there anyone who would like to address the board tonight? Okay, if we don't have anyone, we'll close that, and we have a proposed agenda. Adoption of the consent agenda upon motion and a second and an affirmative vote by members present approves each and every item so designated. However, prior to the adoption of the consent agenda, any board member may remove any item from the consent agenda. This item will then come up for discussion as part of the regular agenda. The purpose of the consent agenda is to expedite routine matters so that the board has more time to deal with substance matters. We have an agenda and we are looking to approve the consent along with the adoption of that agenda. The consent agenda is for items 6 and personnel and 7 new business. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Make that motion.
Ms. Yagenshatz, and a second.
One second.
Mr. Forrester. Is there any discussion, anything that anyone would like to pull out? If not, if we could,
Can I add?
yeah.
Would it be, if it would please the board, I'd like to add an executive session to discuss a matter of personnel.
I guess we need to have that in. Yes. So we will add in at the very end of this meeting, executive session. And that will come in after announcements and board correspondence. If that's all, I guess we've got a motion on the floor with a second, and we're okay with that, correct?
Yes, that's
Mr. Forrester?
Yeah.
Okay. All those in favor of that agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And all opposed? Great. We have an agenda which takes us to item number 4, which is the approval of last month's meeting from November 5th. Can we bring that to the floor, please?
So moved.
Ms. Yagenshatz, in a second.
I can second.
Ms. Powell-Fortna. Are there any discussion, any correction, concerns on that? All those in favor of approving that signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, so that's approved. We have financials treasurer's report, to review the budget status report from October.
Yes, only comment there, the salary codes that we've been talking about the last couple of meetings, I mentioned last time they would be adjusted for the October reports on page 2. The 1620 and the 1621 codes now are aligned with the budget. The only two that are still negatives are in this area of summer help because we had extra help for all the moves that we had going on. We took some of the students on a little bit longer than we normally may have. Other than that, I don't have any comment on that report.
So I got a question to that, John. Last year we had $32,000 in that line as an expense. And I understand you don't have your information, but it's completely zeroed out.
Which code was that in?
160, 1621, 161.
Yeah, I would have to pull that and see what it was specifically.
Okay.
I can, what, no, that's okay.
All right. And then in regards to page 8, looking at line 2250-150, which is about the fifth one down.
Yep.
Seems that we're running a negative balance in the unencumbered.
What's happening there is we haven't shifted over the salaries for the federal grant yet. There's a number of teachers that are federal grant coded, and we also haven't got the final allocations back for this year because of the final cost reports not being approved yet from the state, so we haven't made the adjustments there because we don't have the information yet.
Okay, but it looks like we're increasing by about $118,000. Is that?
That'll actually
Is that accurate?
come down
Okay.
once we make those transfers.
Okay. We have the revenue status report.
A couple items here. One, we put in on code 3101, which is our basic state aid formula, the October payment to the teacher's retirement system. That's the $476,000 amount. We also received $63,000 of the...
I'm sorry, could you go over that again, please?
Yeah, for 3 months, September, October, November, we have to book in against state aid and expense our teacher's retirement contribution, so it hits both sides of the budget. So the $476,000 is the October amount of that. We did September, and then you'll have November come up. Next line, 3102 is our lottery aid. We get a supplemental lottery aid payment of approximately $63,000 a month, so that was received. And we also received $29,000 in the Medicare assistance, which is the last code, 4601.
Okay, and then any questions on that? You have the, to review, approve the treasurer's report. Any comments on that, John?
No comments on that report.
Okay. Any questions?
I'll make a motion.
And a second on that?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And then we have the external audit report, Lori and Polly.
All right, good evening. Thanks for having me. As Brian just said, I am your external auditor. So we come in once a year and we take a look at your financial information. And the goal of our audit is to state whether or not your financial information is in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So that's the goal of what our audit is. So on page number 2 of your audit report is our actual opinion. So on page number 2, it says that we have issued an unqualified opinion, which is the best audit opinion that you can get. There are no exceptions to the report. So this is the best audit opinion the district can receive. The financial statements actually really start on page 19. On page 19, there is your statement of net position. This is the balance sheet for the district, and this is based on the full accrual basis. When you guys are looking at your budget status and your revenue status reports like you just looked at, that's based on modified accruals, so not every single receivable and payable is listed in those reports. So the revenue and the expenditures aren't all listed. The full accrual statement of financial net position here includes all the accruals. It includes your long-term capital assets and your long-term liabilities. So that's the difference between this report and the regular financials that you guys look at on a monthly basis. A couple of comments about this report. You have some additional cash, more cash than you guys had last year. What happened in the district was you started a capital project. You borrowed for that capital project. You haven't made all of your expenditures yet, so cash increased a little bit. So if you compare this to last year, your cash is higher, and that's really part of the reason why, the biggest part of the reason. Receivables were really similar. Capital assets went up some because, again, you made some purchases, a little over $2 million in capital asset purchases last year. You have deferred outflows. Those deferred outflows are due to your pensions, the TRS and ERS system, and your other post-employment benefits. Deferred outflows are an asset that are calculated by the actuaries for both of those. The pension system, both TRS and ERS have their own actuaries, and they calculate out these deferred outflows. So we don't have control over that. We get statements from the systems that tell us what the numbers are. So those the district doesn't really have any control over. You also have a net pension asset proportionate share of 1.395 million, and that is part of the TRS system. In the TRS system, if on June 30th all of your teachers were to retire, you actually have more in your account that's allocated than what you would need to pay that out. So that's why there's an asset there. As you'll see, it works the opposite in ERS. In ERS, we actually have a liability. That is under net pension liability proportionate share. It's about $500,000. So if the school were to close and all your employees then took their retirement, we would actually owe an additional $500,000.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Just, do you mind if I ask a question?
Yeah, not at all.
So you use the example that if all of our teachers retired on June 30th, which would be Armageddon, so we don't want that to happen.
Which isn't going to happen.
Yeah, I know. But we have more in our TRS fund
Yes.
than it would cost us. But we don't control that
No.
money. That's
No. The
Yeah.
district has no control over those. The district makes, and John was just talking about, you don't actually pay cash for those payments. You get a reduction in your aid that's paid to you, same sort of difference. Instead of you actually physically paying the money, they withhold your aid. So you record the aid revenue, and you have the expense for the pension. So annually, you make your payment based on what the retirement system says the rates are, based on people's tiers and how long before retirement. And again, they have actuaries that take all of that information into account. And you have a set aside at the TRS system for Fredonia schools where they have to allocate the assets that they have. And your allocation of assets is actually greater than what it would take to pay out for the retirements at June 30th. And it's been that way for the past few years. I anticipate TRS will be the same way, should, the markets stay up and like that. The ERS is a little bit of a liability, so, you would owe for ERS. Did that answer your question?
absolutely fine.
Okay. So then, if you look at the liability section of your statement of net position, you can see that it shows all of your liabilities. Accounts payable increased over last year, and that was due to the capital project. Obviously, you have large costs as you're doing a capital project, so you had some work that was done by June 30th, but didn't get paid until after June 30th. So that's what that accounts payable number includes, the largest portion of it. There are some other liabilities. You have a new bond anticipation note of $8.1 million. And again, that's the borrowing for the capital project. That is a short-term borrowing, so that'll have to be annually updated and annually reborrowed to do your long-term financing. So that is new for this year, so that's obviously greater than last year. You can see your due to TRS and due to ERS at the end of the year, so that's what you paid after June 30th, really for the year before. We already went over the net pension liability for ERS. You have some bonds payable of about $3.5 million, which that is getting low, so it's good that you're doing a capital project because you want to keep your tax cap stable, and those expenditures for debt need to be level for you to be able to do that. So it's a good thing that you're undergoing a capital project. And the deferred inflows, just like the deferred outflows, are calculated based on your pensions and your OPEB, your other post-employment benefits, and you have actuaries that calculate that out. We talked about the actuaries for the pension plan. The district actually hires its own actuary to calculate your OPEB liability. So that would be liability for teachers, sick and health payouts once they retire from the district. So that would be the district's portion of that. So that's an estimated liability there too. And then you get your total net position, which you can see invested in capital assets is the biggest portion of that, $24 million. You have some restricted net position, and that comes from the restricted net assets, restricted fund balance that we'll talk about in a minute, and some other restrictions based on the OPEB and the pensions. Any questions about your statement of net position? Next one is your statement of activities. This is basically your profit and loss based on a full accrual basis. Again, it takes into consideration all your long-term assets and all your long-term liabilities. And this is kind of a unique statement because it starts out with your expenditures. And then we also show revenues that get directly applied to those expenditures to give you your net expenditures. So you can kind of see what aids and other things might be applied to the expenditures there. And then you can see you have all your revenues listed for a change in net position of 1.1 million to the positive. That's a good thing to get your total net position. Any questions on your statement of activities? Okay, so then page 21 is really the page that starts showing what your regular operating information is. This is the balance sheet for the governmental funds. So this is what the information that John is sort of reporting to you on a regular basis. You can see that you have 4 major funds: general, special aid, school lunch, and capital projects. In general fund, you can see your assets and liabilities there. A couple things I wanted to point out: you have restricted net assets of 1.59 million. If you go to page number 40, page 40 kind of lists those out. Those are the restricted assets. Those are the reserve funds that you have. You have an employee benefit accrued liability of 122,000, tax cert reserve of 500,000, unemployment insurance reserve of 66,000, a capital reserve of 500,000, and a retirement contribution reserve of about 403,000. So that makes up that 1.59 million. You also have some assigned fund balance. What makes that up is the amount of money that you're using to reduce next year's taxes, and a few encumbrances, which are expenditures that actually apply to the 18-19 budget, but won't get paid till the 19-20 budget. That leaves unassigned fund balance of 3.4 million. That is 11.23% of next year's fund balance. So again, it's over the 4% that the state allows. So, obviously you have a management letter comment on that. Special aid fund, the revenues and expenditures and the statement of the assets and liabilities always balanced, so there's no fund balance. That's just where you get your grant monies, and that's the salaries that John was talking about that haven't been allocated yet. It's an expense first, you get the money back later. So there is no fund balance in special aid fund. School lunch fund, you can see your assets and liabilities there. You have a fund balance of about 526,000. That's unassigned. It's actually assigned because it's school lunch fund, but it's the fund balance that you have to use. So that school lunch fund balance, I know the district has been working on some capital plans and some other things that they're going to do with that money to use up some of that money, because that's a pretty high dollar amount. Capital projects, you can see your cash there. 6.7 million, that's the biggest part of the increase in cash on your statement of net position. Your accounts payable there, 765,000. Again, that's work that's been done up through June 30th, but not paid yet. The $8.15 million band payable, which leaves you a negative fund balance of 2.178 million. That negative fund balance will end up going away once you issue the long-term debt for the capital project. So while you spend the money, you have negative fund balance. Once you actually fund it with long-term funding, that will go away. Any questions on the balance sheet? The next couple of statements actually show what are the adjustments to take this governmental funds balance sheet on a modified accrual basis, what entries are made to take it to the full accrual basis. You can see the addition of your capital assets and the addition and subtraction of liabilities. The next financial statement that we should take a look at is on page 24. This is your revenues and expenditures for your governmental funds. You can see general fund had $31.4 million in revenues, $31.1 million in expenditures. You have some other financing sources and uses. Those are transfers to other funds for the general fund. $11,960 went over to federal funds. That's your portion, the district's portion of the summer handicap costs. And $99,777 went for your capital outlay project. That's a project that you guys do every year. It's a $100,000 project right now. And you can do some capital things without having to do a full capital project. So, in the revenues, your real property taxes were $13.65 million. That was up about 2% from last year. That's very reasonable with the tax cap at 2%. Your charges for services went up about 43%. There was some additional tuition that the district had for 2018-19. Use of money in property went up about 47%. That extra cash that you had with your capital project and some other cash were invested in T-bills this year. So that made a bunch of extra interest. So that's why that's up. And Medicaid was up quite a bit. And that's partially due to timing of, you know, when you get your Medicaid money, when you do your billing and then receive it. Last year's was down a little bit, this year's is up a little bit, so mostly due to timing. In your expenditures, you can see you had general support of $3.6 million, instruction $16.9, transportation $1.3, employee benefits $6.1. Debt service principal 2.8 and interest 297,000. Most of the expenditures were pretty level, 1 to 2% increases. The bigger one was the transportation, which went up, and that was due to some additional routes added to the school bus runs. Your special aid again is a 0, revenues equal expenditures. School lunch fund, you had about a $48,000 profit there. So even though the school spent some money this year, still had revenues in excess of expenditures. And you can see the negative in the capital projects fund. Those are just expenditures that have been made for the capital projects that haven't been funded yet. Any questions on that part? Okay, so then we'll go towards the back of the financials. As part of your audit, we do what's called a single audit. The district spends over $750,000 in federal monies, so you are required to have what's called a single audit. And what we have to do as auditors is select some of those grants that you get and do some additional testing there. So if you go back, the single audit starts on page 78. So we have to do some extra work there, take a look at your major programs, make sure you're following the requirements of the grant. When we took a look at that, the district is following those grant requirements, so we had no findings at all on the major programs that we had to test. We did have a couple of findings on internal controls that we've discussed with the district at length in the audit committee meeting, so not going to really go through those at this point. And I think that's it for me unless anybody has any questions.
So the $6.7 million fund balance, you said was,
$6.7 million fund balance, I think that was
or
cash.
6.07?
6.7 was from the capital project.
Okay, yeah. So.
On
so
what page are you
did-
looking
where-
at, Tom?
Where's the exact number? It shows up on page 66 and page 24.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay, I see, $6,070,000, that's your total fund balance for your general fund, that's what you're asking about. Okay,
So you spoke something about our fund balance was up because of the capital project. What line do we look at for that?
okay, so on your statement of net position, your cash and your, really your liabilities are up, because that's where, it adds in that $6.7 million in cash from the capital projects.
So what page are you on?
So I'm looking at pages 19 and 21. So that $6.7 million in cash is higher than it was last year, okay? Because right now, at June 30th, let's just, you know, because it's one day at one point in time, you had all this money that, because you borrowed $8.1 million You only spent about 2, so you had 6.7 left in cash at that point.
Okay.
So that's that increase in where we combine them all. The statement net position and the statement of activities is where they're all combined. In your general fund, it didn't increase by that much. It increased by your last year's profit plus your this year's profit. I mean, so it didn't increase that much in your regular general fund. If you're looking at page 21,
And that was the 172,
excuse me?
the 172,000.
Page 24.
Yes, so it increased by that 172 in total from last year.
Okay, so specifically to my question, where is the balance left after June with the capital project? listed
I'm
on
not
there?
sure what your balance is after June, because I'm not sure exactly how much you spent. I know you spent at least $765,000 after June, but I don't know where your fund balance is after June, because my audit ends in June.
Okay.
So, are you asking for your general fund balance or your capital funds fund balance?
I guess the general fund balance to see the difference.
Okay, so that I don't know because my audit is only as of June 30th, so I don't go beyond that and do financial statements past that, so I can't answer that for you. That's something that you guys will have to do like a fund balance projection potentially to figure out. And I'm assuming that you'll be starting those as you're starting your budget, because that'll be coming up next, pretty soon.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you, guys.
We need a motion to approve the 18-19 external audit report. Can I get a motion on that?
So,
Mr. Forster, Ms. Fagenstadt, second. Any discussion? I will say this. I'm I guess positively optimistic here with what we see our revenue above our expenses. And I know that we're going to be running into a different year, this coming year, with several new salaries that we're looking at. Some special needs that you've explained. Where we're gonna go with the budget this coming year is anybody's guess, in my opinion.
Well, first of all, as we talked about along the way, that the 18-19 budget was built in the same manner in which the previous 5 or 6 or 7 years, whatever it was. So the anticipation was there that all things being equal, there was a chance the fund balance would go up a little bit. Having said that, I can also tell you, which we talked about briefly last meeting, that we're significantly over on BOCES special ed. I'm waiting for the next bill to be able to give the board a better handle on where we're at. So that will be coming out directly out of any of the surplus that we did keep in the budget. So it's quite likely that you're going to see a very narrow amount of surplus left in there.
We won't have the surplus in the 19-20 year that we saw in the 18-19 year.
Quite likely.
Yes. But we've
Which
got
was
to-
kind of where we were headed to, but we didn't know how it was going to play out.
Yeah. I think that was partly what we had looked at, realizing that 11% was a little too high. When I say little, am I sarcastic? I'm not sure, but I think that we're in a good position, is what my thought is. My concern is this. In any business that I've dealt with, it's decisions you make during your good years that restrict you in your bad years, that you have to be very careful of. And you don't want to overextend yourself in those good years when bad years are coming right around the corner.
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned about how this year is playing out so far, because it's only November, but things can change the other way rapidly too.
What's our reimbursement from BOCES? 68%?
72, 72 something.
when do we receive that money, the following year? Okay. So the money that we're receiving this year, what's the difference?
The money we're seeing this year was based on last year, which was about 5, 6 students less than this year. So you're talking 70% of $500,000-$600,000
So we're looking at actually only fronting 28%
net,
of the cost.
net,
Right.
but over 2 years.
I mean, we have to front 100%,
Right.
but we're getting back 72%.
Correct.
Okay, so it's not as doom and gloom. as what
Not in terms of a long-range look, but short-term, we have the obligation to not exceed our total spending plan. And if we have, which I hope we don't, another 8 or 9 special ed kids move in, now that's gonna be way over, so now we're gonna have to look at trimming something else to make sure that we're not over overall. But in terms of net, it's not 100% out, you're never gonna see any of that coming back, so.
And these kids' needs are beyond our capabilities in-house.
Yeah, we have, we talk about it all the time, this is just here too, there's some kids that have a lot of need.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so we've got a motion, we've got a second, we've discussed it. No further questions. Those in favor of approving the 18-19 external audit report signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Next, we have a review of the 19-20 school tax collectors report. If I could get a motion to bring that to the floor, please.
So moved.
Is that Mr. Hawk? And a second?
Second.
Mr. Johnson. Are there any questions on that?
I just have questions. Is it pretty much average as it has been in the past years as far as?
Actually, that was gonna be part of my comment on it. Yes, very much so. Typically for our district, you're running between 93 and 94% of collection every year, which is a great testament to the community support of the school. So for example, 15-16, you're at 93.6, 17-18, you're at 94.1 this year, 94.2, so it's right in that range. You're averaging about 93.8% every year on the collection. The changes that you may notice on the report this year, I think we talked about it along the way, was the state had an extension or good cause on the STAR reimbursements. We had about 24 parcels or thereabouts across, it was only in Pomfret and Sheridan. The other 3 towns didn't have any, but about $17,000 worth of changes to the STAR. That changes what we collect on our end, it goes on to STAR or vice versa. The net levy remains the same. All of that's been submitted to the state. They verified that yesterday, that we're good there. So the number you see on the report reflect what we expected with the levy, other than the 87-cent county rounding adjustments.
Any other questions? Any other comments?
One other comment, I would just like to thank Kathy Ray for her work again this year. She does a great job for us.
Okay. We have a motion, we have a second, and we have to have a roll call vote.
Yes.
Ms. Slagle?
Okay, Mr. Aldrich,
Yes.
Mr. Forster,
Yes.
Ms. Cordna, Yes. Ms. Gagenschatz, Yes. Mr. Jambrone,
Yes.
Mr. Hawk,
Yes.
and Mr. Johnston.
Yes.
Thank you.
As part of the tax collection report, I have 7 pages here. Each board member has to sign each page by your name, so I'll just slide those around. If you don't get it done by the end of the meeting, we can take it to Mr. Certisio in executive session.
Thank you. Okay. We have 3 different transportation contracts. The first one is to approve a contract with First Student. Can I get a motion to bring that to the floor, please?
So moved.
Mr. Hawk first, and then a second.
Second.
Ms. Gaddis. Any questions on that?
The comment will be the same for number 1 and number 2. You recall, we did 2 emergency 31-day contracts for each of these homeless situations. Because of the McKinney-Vento Act requirement, we're required to transport the students even though they're currently in temporary housing. We did the 2 31-day emergency contracts. We did the bid for the balance of the school year, which could be a week or the whole school year, depending what the family situation is. We had, for the first time that I can recall, we had no bidders. So by virtue of State Education Department language, we can then go back to the provider in the 31-day contract, ask them if they'll extend on the same rate, and they did, which is for student. That's what we're doing here with these 2 contracts.
Is that a concern that we didn't get a bid?
First student would have bid. They had some issue with their manager. There was a bus accident downstate. She was down there. She didn't get back in time to get
Okay.
here, and
Okay.
someone was carried forward.
So it wasn't that they didn't want to do this? it
No,
was
there was
just-
no.
okay. Any other questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We have another transportation contract with First Student. Can I have a motion to bring that to the floor?
So moved.
Mr. Forrester, in a second.
Second.
Ms. Powell-Fortna. Any questions on that? Similar situation? Okay. No other comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. We have a motion to piggyback a transportation contract with the City of Dunkirk School. Can I have a motion to bring that to the floor, please? Ms. Gaggins, and a second.
Second.
Ms. Powell-Fortna. Any questions on that?
That one's a little bit different for us. The state changed the regulations, and they now allow districts to piggyback on or run someone else does it. They wouldn't allow that for a number of years. So basically, what Dunkirk's doing, instead of bidding out their contract, they're saying, is it okay if we ride the same bus with you? And we're allowing them to do that. They would be responsible for paying whatever First Student. We charge them anything, monitors or things of that nature that our Dunkirk costs would be solely Dunkirk costs. So it's just a paperwork agreement that, yeah, we have a problem with them on the same bus.
So do they pay for that on a per student basis?
However, First Student calculates it for them.
Okay.
So we're not really splitting the cost, we're just each paying our
We're just agreeing that we have no
cost.
problem with them being on the bus, essentially.
Okay. Any questions on that? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Which takes us to the administrator's report. We've got high school building goals with Mr. Paskey.
Excuse me. Oh, you're fine. I didn't know if you were going to stay there for that. Thank you for presenting this tonight. Let's jump right in. Our first goal is based on reducing chronic absenteeism. Chronic absenteeism is currently defined as missing 10% or more of the total school days in a year. So if we have 180 school days, that would be 18 school days in a year would be considered chronically absent. And if you think about a 9 or 10 month school year, it's about two days a month. And that's not very much when you think about it, just missing a couple of days a month. So people don't realize that it can add up very quickly if you're just missing a couple of days here or there. These are some of the things that we're going to do. Our goal is to decrease by 5%. Personally, I wanted to make it like 50%. But we are involved with this National Center for Rural Education Research Networks. It's a Harvard study on chronic absenteeism in rural schools. And their suggestion was, this is a 5-year study that we're participating in, was for the first year to look at 5%, don't go nuts with it, and really look at some things that you want to do. Just initially, what we're looking at with communication with parents and guardians, some very simple things that we can do to improve the communication. So for example, we currently send home letters when students miss 5 days and 10 days and 15 days and so on, and to let them know what's going on. But some things I'd like to add to that, if you may notice on your fuel bill, they often have a little graphic that shows here's the amount of fuel that you use and here's the amount of fuel that your neighbors use. I think it would be really nice to add a little graphic to our letters that say, here's the absenteeism of your student compared to the absenteeism of maybe the kids in their grade level. And say, okay, you're at 9 absences, but the average for your grade level is 2. Oh, that's shocking, you know, and maybe they don't realize how their kid is doing compared to everyone else. So I think that's one way. Another really simple thing that we can do to improve the communication is we send robocalls home automatically when kids are absent, but they go home, I think, around 10 o'clock or 10:30, often when parents aren't home. So something that I want to look at doing is changing that, not necessarily getting rid of it at that time, but looking at a possible way to have it after the work hours, so maybe a 6 p.m. or a 6:30 p.m. call that would help parents to maybe actually be there when the phone call comes, because kids can come home and erase messages and so on that maybe the parents won't get. So that's a couple of simple things. Increasing student connectedness to school. We are meeting weekly to figure out ways that we can do this. One way, obviously, is that we want kids to be involved with school activities. So we have multiple clubs, athletics, after-school programs. But we do have a couple of new ones. We just added the GSA recently. We have a boys' power club where students can go after school, where there's a small counseling component to that, but they're also working out and improving their bodies after school. We added girls this year. In previous years, there was a problem with transportation for the girls, but I think we've got this nailed down, and so that program is off and running. We've also started a Check and Connect study hall for groups of 2 or 3 students at a time that are getting some mentorship with the teacher. So giving them more connectedness to the teaching staff and having some mentorship within the building to help along those lines.
Darren,
Yes.
that decreased chronic absenteeism by 5%,
Yes.
where does it stand right now?
Well, if you want to look at it at our current state, I have 48 kids that I would consider chronically absent, which at this point I would deem as 6 absences or more. But if you look at it realistically, by the end of the year, some of those 6 absences might be a kid was sick for 6 days right now because they had the flu or an extended time off because of an illness, and that might be the only 6 days that they have. So we're looking at a very small snapshot of this. It won't be 48 kids at the end of the year. I would say closer to 20 kids at the end of the year that might be chronically absent. So it depends from year to year.
Oh, okay, your statistics.
Yes,
You know statistics, right?
surely.
Okay, are you dropping it 5% from, let's say, 15% down to 10%? Or are you dropping it 5% of the 15%?
Oh, I see what you're saying. What I'm looking at is I want to have 5% fewer students that are going to be chronically
5%
absent.
fewer students?
Yes,
Okay. By the end of the year?
by the end of the year, based on what we have currently, yes.
Okay.
Okay, what we've had in the past.
I'm sorry, man. So
That's okay.
are you basically, currently are you looking at previous year's data?
Previous year's data. So, I'm sorry, when I said, I don't mean the 48 kids that I have right now. I
That was my way of
apologize.
helping you correct yourself.
Thank you.
So, do you know what % of your student body was considered chronically absent last year?
I would hazard, I don't want to hazard a guess
Yeah,
on
don't.
that. I don't want to.
That's something that you and I should
But
talk
yes,
about.
and I do have numbers for that in my office, but I don't, off the top of my head, remember that number.
Because that's really gonna be your comparison point.
Yes,
Now, that's your starting point, is previous year's data.
correct,
And now you're implementing some programs and some plans for your staff and whatnot.
correct.
Well, can I interject?
Surely.
That's a different group of students, too.
It is.
So, I mean, their habits are gonna be completely different than this year's.
And that's what they warned us about at the network that we were at. It said, you know, it's hard to compare year to year because you have different groups of kids, different challenges, different sickness levels even, and it's hard. But there's a nice trend though, if you look at what they just finished a study with the urban schools that was quite successful. And some of these things that they're doing, like the improved, just that communication that I was talking about, that lowered just simple things like that 5%. And that's not even bigger programming ideas that we have coming down the road. We've only had 1 meeting so far. We have 2 more scheduled for this year, one in January, one in March, where we're going to start
So who are you
piloting
meeting
ideas.
with?
Harvard representatives, and then they've selected schools from across the state, all rural schools. And we meet as a consortium of all of those schools and then the researchers from Harvard. And the idea is that we're going to have very short studies where we'll have a control group and a treatment group, and in 4 to 6 weeks, we'll be measuring how much of a change there is and whether or not that's been effective in that short period of time, and then trying other new things.
So has there been any reach out to the individual students to ask them why?
No, not yet. But that is part of, yeah.
I just know that, you know, in the times that I was going to school, we were working with helping the family, you know, it was grape season, or it
Sure.
was, you know, there was a lot of farming going on, and, you know, things were a little different, so is that an issue today?
I don't know that there are as many of those. I'm sure there are some. You know, I think that we have a lot of other reasons. Many students that don't have parents that are at home in the morning when they're getting ready to go to school to make sure that they're getting on the bus. And that's true. Definitely in the urban study was a big problem where the parents weren't home. We have that here for sure. Okay. Any other questions about absenteeism? All right, our second goal is regarding literacy improvement. We want our students to demonstrate improvement in literacy this year based on local measures. What I mean by that is we just gave a nationally normed literacy screening at the beginning of the year called the Gates McGinnity test. And in that test, we're looking at vocabulary and comprehension of all of our students, 9th grade, 10th grade, and 11th grade. Our 12th graders are on their way out, so we didn't measure them, okay? But it was astonishing to me how many kids were actually below where they need to be in literacy. So looking at our school district so far for the freshmen, sophomores, and juniors, I have 41 students that are in the 31st to the 49th percentile, which means that those people, if you're like at the 31st percentile, you only did better than 31% of the nation on that level. Okay, and we have 41 of our students that are juniors, sophomores, and freshmen that are at that level. I have 28 students that are between the 11th percentile and 30th percentile, and I have 10 students that are between the 0th percentile and the 10th percentile. So some concerns that we need to address, and we have been addressing them. Over the summer, we did an instruction leader book study, and I purchased books for my instructional leaders called Disciplinary Literacy in Action. And our goal wasn't just to sit down and read this whole book. What we did was we took out parts that we thought were very important, and then, and then by discipline, in the back there are several appendices that go through and talk about each individual discipline. You might think, well, how is literacy going to be effective in a phys ed class? You know, where would you do reading? I don't remember ever reading a book. But for example, I just wanted to point out a couple of things from phys ed, and it does this for each one of our disciplines. Visualizing movements from verbal and written descriptions, reading a sports performance and evaluating strengths and weaknesses of individuals and teams, evaluating written or oral feedback from coaches and teammates, attending to cause and effect relationships between nutrition, exercise routines, mindsets on fitness, and performance, noticing themes of perseverance, overcoming obstacles, and learning from mistakes in novels, sportscasts, articles, and sports movies, and it goes on. There are many different activities that they show how you can integrate these literacy skills into each individual discipline. To help the teachers in this area, Lisa Reinhardt is reading certified, and she's been helping with literacy coaching. And so we're taking each one of our faculty meetings and setting time aside so that she can work with each one of our teachers and our instructional groups to figure out exactly what types of interventions we want to use. Now, if we go back to that data that I talked about, that first group that are in the 31st to the 49th percentile, we're tying this to MTSS, and Amy Piper is working on this with us as the MTSS coordinator. And that first group is what we call the Tier 1 interventions. Those are things that all the teachers are going to be doing for all of our kids, and it's going to be helping everybody. But that second group that's from the 11th percentile to the 30th percentile, that would be considered Tier 2. And they're going to need a little bit more specialized stuff. So Lisa, we repurposed her a little bit. Since I didn't have enough English classes to keep all of my English teachers teaching English, we repurposed her to be this literacy coach to push into some of our classes. And it's not just the English classes, it's all of our classes. And she's available to all of our teachers, and she helps them. So she's pushing in to help with some of those Tier 2 interventions in the classroom. The part that I'm struggling with, though, is we have the 10 kids that are in the 0th percentile to the 10th percentile, and that would be a tier 3 intervention, which is typically going to be a pull-out situation. And I don't have a great way to address that right now, because I don't have staff that is certified in reading to do that. So that's something down the road, I'm planning to see that we might need to look at someone who could provide those services for us. I mean, we do have special ed teachers, but they're also not reading certified, but they do a great job filling in for that purpose right now. So that's something to look at in the future.
So, Darren, I'm sorry I'm jumping the gun here.
No, that's okay.
But first off, I want to commend you for number one, wanting to improve literacy, but doing it as a whole building effort. If you really want to move the needle, it can't be one person. It can't be one certified person, no matter what it is. It really needs to be all involved. And the fact that you immediately went to phys ed, I think was really smart in this presentation, because there's so much vocabulary and enrichment that can happen in all subject areas, and really convincing your staff, which I know isn't going to be difficult to do, that each member needs to be working towards literacy no matter what their content area is. And I also want to tell you that I spent some time with Lisa Reinhardt, and how impressed I am with her expertise and her knowledge, and her willingness to take the inherent risks of working with her colleagues. Even though they're wonderful people, it's difficult for teachers to go to other teachers and offer suggestions. And I know that work is going to continue to improve over time. So you're repurposing her may have been serendipitous based on some other things that happened with your schedule, but it was certainly the right move on your part.
So if you dig down on those, I believe you said it was 10 students that were below the 10% level.
Yes.
If you dig down and try and understand what's happening there, do those fall into that first slide that we looked at, and that they're the absentee students? Is it that? Is there any other item in here that?
There are. I mean, there are students with disabilities. There are students that are English as their second language. So there are many factors that go into it, some of which will be attendance, some of which will be their ability level, or if they have a disability, or if they have English as a second language. So there are multiple measures that are included in those 10 kids. It's not just all 10 of those are constantly absent, because that's definitely not the case.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions about literacy?
No, I just want to say one thing.
Thank you.
I commend you for trying to do this, because over the past few years, whenever we get state reporting and so on, it's been quite obvious that we've been lagging back in the reading area, and we need to do something. And we're really, I don't feel, doing enough. So this is a step in the right direction. And like most things, if they don't work perfectly at first, we redesign it and continue on.
Sure.
But I'm encouraged to see that we are making an effort, other than getting reports, that are showing us in some way that we're lagging back in the reading area, or literacy area. So, thank you. I think this is something that's much needed and needs to be addressed and to try in some way, shape, or form.
At our faculty meeting, just to give our teachers a pat on the back, one of the teachers mentioned that this needs to be a culture of literacy in our district. It can't just be anything that we're focusing on at one level or one building. It does have to be a district-wide component. And I think we all agree with that. And lastly, our social emotional learning progress. We just gave the fall version of Panorama, which is measuring components of the classroom and school climate. And so we haven't got the data back from that yet, but all of our students participated in that during their phys ed classes. The phys ed department was very generous and donated their class time. So we tend to go to our English and our social studies departments a lot, because all of the students take those, and when we need to give something to all the kids, they always get hit with it. And I just want to thank the phys ed department for giving us 2 class periods to do this and give this to our students. Some of the areas that we're trying to improve our school climate in, we did start with Hello this year. We did it last year, but this year with a different component. Quarterly, I'm trying to start with Hello activities that deal with like anti-bullying, school connectedness, and just general positive culture for the school. We also are continuing with our Pride initiatives. If you Remember, we do send pride notes home to kids as teachers see our students demonstrating our various pride acronym qualities. This month is integrity, by the way, for November. These notes are going home, they're being put on refrigerators, the kids are excited about it, the parents are excited about it, and it's still a very positive influence. This particular week is Gratitude Week under our Pride Initiative, where we kind of do it in reverse. We ask all of their kids to think about or having gratitude towards the adults in the building, and we stress that it's not just a specific teacher necessarily. Any adult in the building is really contributing to their education, and if there's anyone that they feel that they need to express gratitude, they give a gratitude card to the adults. So they all get turned into the high school office. Over this weekend, our staff will be feverishly sorting through all of those to put them into the teachers' mailboxes and other staff members' mailboxes so that they can have them for Thanksgiving, which I think is very fitting for gratitude and Thanksgiving go together very well. This year we're piloting a freshman seminar class. It's currently a semester-long course, so we have it running in the fall semester and again in the spring semester. All of our freshmen are taking part in this, where we're really focusing on the transition from 8th into 9th grade, organization and study skills, and just general positive behaviors that they need to be exhibiting in high school. This next one is not actually happening yet. This is something that we're working on, is having a welcome crew in the morning. As you probably know, that our staff for middle school and high school, the start time is 7:40. Unfortunately, our kids get here way before that, and I think it would be really nice to have our staff here welcoming them when they get off the bus and being a presence in the building. So I've suggested to Jeff and to the union president for the teachers that it would be nice if we get the teachers in maybe 20 minutes early, voluntarily, that then maybe we could comp them 20 minutes at the end of the day, certain days, and they could rotate through, so not all missing a bunch of after school time or anything like that. It might be once a week, might be once every other week, but just on a volunteer basis. So it's something we're working on piloting this year, so I want to get that off the ground as soon as possible. I think it would be great just to have staff being out front as the kids get off the bus and in the hallways, just to keep an eye on things. Yes, we have cameras, but it's not the same set of people. Lastly, we added a course semester drop deadline. Semester course drop deadline. After 21 days of the semester, you have to make your decision to drop by then. It used to be a semester long, and it's really difficult when you get a kid that's in a semester class and you're 7/8 of the way through the class and then they decide to drop it, and it's kind of hard. So we wanted to give really a nod to grit and making sure the kids are staying in classes that are a little bit more challenging. Instead of saying, yeah, halfway through you can drop this class, okay, you have 21 days, you make your decision. After that, you gotta stay in it and you gotta start working harder if things are getting to a difficult situation. So we're past that 21-day period. That was on September 26th. It's 21 calendar days, by the way. It's not 21 school days. So that's 3 weeks after school starts. And for the most part, it's been very effective. We've had a couple of special situations, and we've left it that way, that the principal can make that decision to allow them to drop if there are extenuating circumstances.
Is this a student's recommendation, or is this based on student guidance counselor or student teacher?
Actually, there's 3 components. It's four components: student, teacher, guidance counselor, parent. And so all of them are involved in the process.
Okay. Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
So you have, this is a goal, but typically when I see goals, I see something that's measurable and timely, and I see that we've got show improvement. Do you have a way of measuring that?
Yes, that's what the panorama, so I didn't have a number to give because we just gave this, and I'm not really sure what I'm starting with. So as soon as we get the data back from this, I'll be able to update you guys with a little bit more information on this. And then we're going to give the panorama the same survey again at the end of the year and see where we are as far as improvement. Okay, so yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
In addition to that, Mr. Patch, you should also include your attendance data, okay? And you should also include your disciplinary data. So you're really talking about the culture of the school and teaching the whole child. And while those are negative numbers,
Sure.
as they go down, they're actually point to a positive trend. There's really not much way for you to track, other than anecdotally, student attendance at activities, and whether it's a sporting event or a concert or an art show or
Sure.
any of those types of things. You'll know you're having a real bad problem when they're all of a sudden not coming to your dances, but I know that hasn't been a problem.
No, the kids come to the dances.
And you know what, before you move on, I do want you to highlight for the board how you started this year with the students. Because you did something a little different in the auditorium, and you challenged them a little bit differently, and it goes right along to start with hello, and
Sure.
that's something I want you to highlight.
Well, the first day is typically a welcome day. We go through the rules and all of those things, which is what we did. But I thought that this year, since we started at the end of a week, we had a Thursday and a Friday for the first 2 days of school, and it's an A day and a B day. And so the A day kind of gets shortchanged in a way because we spend all that time in an assembly at the beginning of the day, and then the classes are shortened. And I figured it'd be smart to do that to the B day as well, so that both of the days get the same thing. So for the second day, we went through and talked about the start with hello, and that we want to make this a culture of something that we're doing throughout the year, and not just we're going to do this for a week later on in September. We're going to be doing this several times throughout the year, and really just giving kids a challenge to be better school citizens and stronger advocates for themselves and for each other. And we showed a video on empathy, and I think it hit home it was a little bit of a risk. I mean, I was afraid because I haven't done that before, and it was a beautiful video, and I wasn't sure if kids were going to take it seriously. And at the end of it, it just went through kids in a school, and the things that were going on in their lives kind of showed over their heads in words, and the things that you didn't necessarily know. It's like, like even the secretary's car was broken into and stolen last night, and it was the only vehicle for their family, and now they don't know how they're going to get their kids to school or how she's going to get to work, and all the issues that people were dealing with. And I felt like the kids were just sitting there going, oh my God, how did you know that was going on about me? And you could hear a pin drop at the end of the video. I mean, the kids were just very in tune with it. Kids were excited about it. I thought it was a great start to the school year.
Agreed.
And that's really all I have. If there are any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Paskey?
Number 9. We have a discussion on our meeting schedule coming up for December. We were planning a retreat with Dr. O'Rourke, and we wanted to try and keep this to Tuesdays, the retreat. And Dr. O'Rourke was not able to make any other Tuesday other than January 21st. So we're proposing that we move that Tuesday, January 21st meeting to the 28th, and then the January 21st would be our board retreat. Does anyone have an issue with that?
The retreat's the same time as the meeting?
It's 6:30 to 9:30 is what we've allotted. The 21st would be the retreat from 6:30 to 9:30, and then he's proposing that the 21st meeting would move to, board meeting would move to the 28th.
Everybody okay with that? And then we also, we're going to be looking at April, because the April 7th is within the spring break. And we'll have to determine any of us are gonna be in town that day. But we're not gonna tackle that today, we'll tackle that as we get closer. But just so you understand that, that may change also. Anything else?
And then I think there was one more.
Yeah, there's one more, just clerical change that needs to be made, so you'll see it says Tuesday, April 30th. That Tuesday is actually the 28th, not the 30th. So
Yes.
that was just an error on my part, which I would like to correct.
Yes, so it is not Tuesday, April 30th, it's Tuesday, April 28th.
Correct.
Yes, thank you. Okay. The board has reserved this time to hear comments from the audience. Those wishing to address the board are asked to stand, give their name and address, and limit their comments to 5 minutes or less per individual or group. Audience members seeking to respond complete a board correspondence sheet and return that to the district clerk. Sligo. Is there anybody who would like to address the board tonight? Yes.
Hello, Jeff Truinsky, science teacher, Forestville, New York. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you all for the opportunity to work with your amazing sons and daughters here at Fredonia. It's an amazing district, and I've enjoyed the 20 years that I've been here. It's an honor to work with such amazing young adults, and every day I learn something new, and hopefully they do too. Second, the pride theme for this month of November is at Fredonia High School is integrity. And I feel integrity means doing the right thing, no matter who is watching or whether it's popular or not, which brings me here tonight. I came here tonight to advocate for the students of Fredonia and the high school science program. Several major changes have occurred to the high school science program just this year, and the science department doesn't feel that these changes benefit our students. First, the administration switched our freshman earth science course for freshman living environment. Second, the Regents science courses were reduced by 20 minutes a class, which is equivalent to 50 minutes per week. And third, the loss of our AIS classes this year with no supports in place for our AIS students. The high school science department feels these changes were arbitrary, unnecessary, and hurt the students of Fredonia. First, we don't know why administration switched the sequencing of the Regents Earth Science class in living environment. Many of the top schools on the Business First rankings teach Earth Science first. And when you examine the June Regents exam schedule, you see that Regents Earth Science exam is often scheduled on the same day as the sophomore Global Studies Regents exam. This means for students that take Regents Earth Science at a sophomore level, they will also have to take a Global Regents exam on the same day. Forcing students to take two major Regents exams on the same day is not a schedule for success. We had a successful program running our sequence here for decades and have not received any information as to the need or reasoning to the switch of the sequence of Earth Science and living environment. Second, I feel the loss of the class or lab time is a serious hindrance to preparing students for their future. Previously, we were getting 2 class periods and 1 lab period every other day. The loss of 20 minutes per class means that we have a 20-minute lab period every other day attached to our regular class time, while most schools throughout this region have as much time as we previously had last year, a period every other day. It means there are currently middle school classes that meet with more time than our Regents science classes, while the high school science classes are supposed to be getting extra time to meet the mandated lab requirement. It means our students will struggle more with labs and tests due to the lack of time to properly prepare them. We feel it weakens our program and our students' ability to score well on these crucial exams. I also feel it will hurt our students when applying for colleges and scholarships if they're not scoring as well as their counterparts in schools throughout this region. Finally, we need to provide proper support for our struggling AIS students. Administration cut our class time and also eliminated our AIS bioscience and geoscience courses. We don't have any program in place to properly support these struggling students. We need to create proper AIS supports before we change our AIS programming. Our AS students are currently struggling, and we feel that this is only going to get worse if we don't address their needs. Fredonia High School is an amazing place, and I feel the programming and the students are the things that earned us this National Blue Ribbon Award. But why did we make all these changes this year if we had a successful program in place? Fredonia High School usually scored very well compared to other school districts on the state exams. We always tried to prepare our students for more than just a Regents exam at the end of the year. And we always strive to give them the skills that they would need in college and beyond. But the decrease in programming and class time means we have to eliminate curriculum from our lessons. I'd be happy to discuss any of these concerns with you and provide you with any other supporting information if you need. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Any other comments from the audience? Mr. Hall, Mr. Rankin? Nothing? Ms. Fortnite? Nothing? You didn't come here to speak? No? Okay. We'll close that then. Okay.
We're hopeful.
The next regular Board of Education meeting will be held December 10th, at 6 p.m. right here. With that, Mr. Paskey, do you have anything additional?
Well, since you asked, we did go to Washington. Mr. Certicio, Kate Summer, English teacher, an instructional leader for the English department, and I went to Washington. Technically, it was National Harbor, Maryland, and we received the National Blue Ribbon Award from Betsy DeVos at the hotel. It was amazing, a great conference. I did bring along the plaque that I'd like to pass it on to the board members. Take a look at it that we received. We also received a National Blue Ribbon flag that we can put on our flagpole, but I would suggest that maybe we have some sort of a ceremony at some point to raise that flag, but then maybe we could have it framed and have a little National Blue Ribbon shrine somewhere in the school and put up all of our National Blue Ribbon items. But overall, an incredible program, some really top-notch speakers at the program, and wow, it's just an honor to represent our school at this. And I just want to reiterate that this is a district achievement. Even though the high school won this is something that we need to be proud of, that all of our levels and everyone at our district, every single person really contributed to this. So it's just, I'd like to thank the board for the opportunity to be able to go and do this. This is exciting. Thank you, Mr. Certicio.
Thank you for letting me join you and Kate. It was an honor, if you don't mind if I just.
No, you want to take that, go
I
ahead.
do want things back, but not in the transportation, as we heard earlier. You know, Mr. Paskey, you are absolutely correct that the speakers were outstanding. We did not receive that award directly from Ms. DeVos. She was there and she did speak.
She signed her plan.
And what really struck me is that overwhelmingly, the speaker after speaker in breakout session was, congratulations on this award. You need to think about what you're going to do next. And there's no resting on your laurels. You're going to celebrate. You're going to utilize the energy and the positivity to move your building forward and to do things differently, to meet learners where they are, to bring them where we need them to be, and to be courageous in your decision making and as you continue to work with your colleagues and so on and so forth. And I thought those were really pertinent messages, not only for you and Kate and I to hear, but also for our district as we continue to undergo modifications and changes and improvements that maybe aren't recognized early on. And you know, we heard about some changes just now from Mr. Chawinski. And we need to continue to examine the efficacy of what we're doing, how it's helping to improve our students' outcome, and maybe push the instructional envelope a little bit more as well. So we celebrate today. We're going to celebrate at some point too, and that's part of our district improvement team that you'll be at the next meeting. And we'll schedule that and really have a district-wide celebration, because as you pointed out, it is a recognition of work pre-K through 12, and certainly at the home as well. And then we're going to work really hard at getting even better. So, congratulations to you and your staff, and glad to be a small part of it.
Thank you.
Ms. Troutman?
Well, this week we are celebrating our middle school musical, The Wizard of Oz, so Friday night at 7 and Saturday at 3 and 7. So we're very excited tomorrow. They're going to give us a quick little preview, both our school and the elementary and Wheelock, so we're excited about that. Just to give you an update, again, on the middle school, we are continuing to work with our team, working on the schedule and teachers short-term to allow for more travel time for farther traveled classes. We're working to find some additional minutes for our lunches in grades 7 and 8. We are investigating additional ways to provide academic intervention services for our students who are not in the academic intervention sections. We are continuing to identify how to best communicate with parents about changes, working through the site-based team. Our long-term plans are we're going to continue to work with the scheduling committee to adjust the schedule to provide more flexibility while ensuring students' needs are being met. We will continue to work with the site-based team to share this progress, get their feedback on what we're doing. We're planning for effective communication of any schedule changes that we will be making in the long term. We are looking at offering individual parent meetings with our middle school counselor to discuss course offerings and what does that mean, really getting the parents' input. Our report cards are going out hopefully tomorrow, and there will be a grade 5-6 letter to the parents in there talking about communication, setting up meetings, talking about future advanced classes and how we can do a better job to work with them so they understand the opportunities that kids have. And we will continue to investigate the need for additional on-ramps for our advanced classes. I have been working with our team on a middle school communication plan because we know communication is important. Joe has helped me a little bit investigating Power School and how we can use Power School to send out messages to families via email. He's willing to help me with the website so we can put up communications on websites. Sending written letters home is important as well, so we're trying to kind of hit parents in every avenue that they communicate so that we can ensure we do a better job communicating.
Mr. Collins.
Yeah, we had a last minute addition to our calendar. We're still working on building a love of reading at the elementary school, so we are gonna have a book bingo night. It's December 5th, and we picked that night because it's the night of the grade 3 and 4 chorus concert. So we're gonna have the bingo before the concert because we felt we could get a good turnout. It would limit the number of trips that people have to take to the school for an event. So I worked with our school librarian, and we have a good number of books that are new. This year received through some Chautauqua County program, and everyone who shows up will earn a book, even if you don't get bingo, but you'll get an additional book if you get bingo. So, and then afterwards you get the concert. So that's what we have going on, and it's been a busy time of year, so looking forward to the holiday season.
Great. Mr. Rada.
We are going to be putting together a new Smart Schools purchase plan committee. Our first meeting will be December 3rd. The committee will be looking at creating a purchase plan for our available Smart Schools bond act money. So our first project was security cameras on the district. We're looking to focus on security on this campus again and the Wheelock campus, and also some instructional technology. So it's a work in progress.
Where did you spend your day today, Mr. Rita?
I was at Eureka Laguitas, where I was participating in an Ed Law 2D all-day training.
And this is a new law that is really going to change the requirements of school districts and how they work with.
How we work with data protection, personal information. It's a big change in how we do things. And Doug Prince and I are still trying to wrap our heads around it. We're at a better point now than we were a month ago, but there's some big changes regarding how we how we use software.
So any software vendor that we partner with that has access to our student data, jump in and correct me. 'Cause you
Have to be compliant with the education law too.
They have to comply with this education law. So lucky for us, we have partners in Area 1 and Area 2 BOCES that if we purchase the software and whatnot through them, all of the ed law components are taken care of for us. Where we're going to see a shift, or we're going to have to see a shift, is where individuals are interested in purchasing an app or some software. We're going to have to come to some decisions as a district, how we can comply with ed law. It may cause some changes at the user level. This is new, and you just spent your day at a conference, and Doug Prince was with you as well, our Director of Technology. But I just wanted to share that with the board to give you a little bit of taste of some of the things that we're taking a look at, because they are going to have some impacts as we move forward. Shouldn't be financial, shouldn't be anything that reaches the board level, but it certainly could affect our end users in some way, shape, or form. Thank you for spending your day there.
Oh, you're welcome.
Mr. Earl? No? Board members? Mr. Zambrone?
No, thank you.
No? Mr. Hawk?
I've got a question for Mr. Paschke and Mrs. Troutman. Do we use texting at all to reach parents?
I think we can through Power School.
But do we?
Not that I'm aware of.
I mean, I know that I'm sitting in a meeting, I can read correspondence and continue with my day, but a lot of times I'll overlook a voicemail.
It's certainly something to look at.
And then, Joe, what's the dollar amount we're working with the smart school bonds?
Oh, goodness. Our initial allocation was, I think, 1.1 or 1.3 million dollars. Our initial project, it was only like 160,000, but that even was reduced because there was an 18-month turnaround. So we're looking at over $1 million worth of funds that we have to find use for.
And you're developing a tech committee to take a look at those things.
Yes.
And then finally, the community has been asking, I've gotten 3, maybe 4 people that have asked about the herbshite painting missing out of the cafeteria. Has that been sold? Has that been discarded?
No, we had it here last year.
It's here. I think it's here.
Well,
Okay,
you're the one that found it, so it should
Right.
still be here. Is it
Yeah.
hanging in your office? You got enough room in there?
Yeah, it's not hanging in my office. It was placed in storage, I just don't know where, but yes.
I saw that gentleman painting that, it was in a JV football team.
Really?
You know, yeah, it'd be nice.
I'm not saying anything.
like this.
I'm smirking, but I'm not saying anything, Mr.
He
Campbell.
was sitting out there with his easel, his chair.
Squishing berries.
And he was painting that. But I never stayed still long enough to get in the background.
So
Talk to Randy and see if he.
Last time we
Well,
did this,
we
you found it.
did, but we put it it was in the social studies storage room, and then that was emptied out when we had to move everything around for the construction, so I'm not sure where it ended
So
up.
tomorrow, we're going on a hunt.
So we're gonna find it.
Find this, whoever finds it.
So
gets a
the
prize.
last person asked me, is the school looking at selling it? I mean, they're not willing to hang it up because it's offensive, I guess.
I'm not gonna go on.
So let's find it, and then we can talk about it, if it's
It
school
has
property.
the tax lien.
Oh, that was it. That,
They
okay.
used to use a lot of, on taxes, and some people look at that now, which look at it differently back then. Because that was a common piece of equipment related to football. I would think if anything, I think the college probably has quite a collection of those items, that if it goes anywhere, it should not be sold. This is just me speaking now, this is my opinion, that it probably should be, look at returning it to the university for some, for whatever purposes they may have. But I don't know.
Well, now he taught at the
He
campus
was very
school,
well
And then
known
taught at
and,
Fredonia State, correct?
yes, for years.
But taught at campus school first.
Well, he was there for a while, yeah, but they were, together anyway, so.
This is a big work of art, right?
It's
It's
huge.
very large, yes, very large.
Used to be in the high school cafeteria.
Yes, and it was just a horrible location for it. When I had it cleaned, I took it over to the paper factory and looked at getting it reframed, and there was ketchup on it. It was scratched, and so it was not in great condition.
Well, let's find it, and then we could have a discussion. You know, would be a board's decision, but Mr. Giambrone, I think you make a nice suggestion.
Mhm.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay. Mr. Forster?
Last night I went to the Chautauqua County School Board Association meeting, and there were 3 presenters from the county, Chautauqua County Health and Human Services, and the Child Advocacy Program, talking about different ways that they are serving the needs of children in Chautauqua County, talking about human trafficking, absenteeism, drug abuse, CPS programs, all sorts of things. So they have some good resources. I brought some things which I'll give to you, and then you can hand out if you want. And the next one is Monday, December 16th. And superintendents of Chautauqua Lake and Ripley are going to be there to talk about their collaboration for tuition students. And it is actually at the Chautauqua Hotel in Celeron. So if you haven't been there yet, I heard it's pretty nice, and it might be interesting topic. So, and that includes dinner and perfect. That's it.
I'm glad to hear that we have some continued, dialogue around middle school initiatives. 2 thoughts, to kind of share from a communication plan perspective is that in addition to texting and our technology components, that we are including some live interactive components. I think we do have a community that's eager for relationship and interaction, so whether that's, formally on the board meeting agenda, so people know that there's gonna be an update sometime between now and when we anticipate changes, or something separate for the middle school, that we could, make that happen. And I guess the other question for you, Mr. Certisio, is do we anticipate a formal response to the community letter that we received, and any potential timing for that? Just to kind of have some closure at some point around some of those concerns.
Sure.
Just a follow for Mr. Paskey, with the literacy, I was just thinking, do you, like, digging into it, do you have any technical literacy that you're looking into? Because in terms of literacy, like, everybody has to read a manual to how to work a snowblower this time of year, things
Yes.
like that. Technical literacy is very different from other types of literacy.
It is, and the examples that they give, for example, in some of the math, science, technology, computer classes are very much into technical writing and technical reading. So, and understanding the difference between sitting down and reading a novel versus reading a textbook or a manual and those types of things. So yes, that is built in, along with more advanced vocabulary that goes along with those. So yes, it is a piece of it.
And I like Mr. Giambrone, I commend you for it, because, everybody needs technical literacy in their life, to read those manuals, but when my kids went to college, it was a different world. There's a lot of textbooks to read, and we tend not to read as many textbooks in high school.
Right.
So for college-ready kids,
That's something that we're trying to get back to in high school, is spending time actually reading textbooks in those technical areas. And certain, you as a former physics teacher, understand that when you're reading a textbook, and often the author will say something like clearly, and then they state some horrendous mathematical expression that wasn't really that clear, that when you're reading something like that, you're trying to teach kids, okay, if you don't understand when it says clearly and it jumps to this, how do you fill in the gaps there and take the time, instead of just reading through like a novel and skipping through all of that we do need to take time and read and reread and say, okay, how did it get from step 1 to step 2, and those types of things, yes.
my last few years of teaching, I actually initiated a reading program with my physics kids, and at first they were terrible. They were
But they get
horrible.
better.
And I would have them read a piece, a set, a number of pages a night, and then when I'd quiz them the next day, the first thing right up on the smartboard was 5 questions on the reading, and they crashed and burned, but they got better as time went on, so I think it's a great idea.
Good skills, thank you.
Thank you. You got $5?
Do I have $5? Sure. Boy, you showed
Well,
some
your
chest.
time is already
My
done.
time is up, but
You wanted
so-
more time,
Oh,
so.
my wife, my wife wants not to see where I put my life. I'm like, 20?
So if you wanted more
Yes,
time, it's gonna
Because
cost
I
you
want to
$5.
let you know how thankful I am to be part of this district as we head into Thanksgiving week. And I'm thankful for that our community is actively involved. I'm thankful for the administrative team and the efforts they put forth. I'm even thankful for Mrs. Slagle because she keeps me in line and tells me where I need to be. And I just want to wish all of you and all of our folks here a very healthy and happy Thanksgiving holiday. Hopefully you have time to enjoy your family. I'm going to have all 3 of my boys home for a short period of time, so I'm really looking forward to that. Is that worth $5?
I'll let you pass. Thank you. Okay. We need to enter into executive session. We won't conduct any business, but we'll go into executive session, deal with what we've got to deal with, discuss what we've got to discuss, not make any decisions, leave executive session, and then adjourn. So can I have a motion to enter?
I heard something over there.
Mr. Giambron and Ms. Fortner. We are now in executive session.
Oh, someone wants to take our picture.